Meanwhile, sometimes all we anchors have to do is shut up and let the news speak for itself. Or as the great Warner Wolf put it, go to the videotape. A tape of two very different stories and how they were covered. The first one, of course, you know quite well. Show this again.
Calls at this hour for the feds to step in, investigate the explosive emails that show Christie's aides closing highway lanes on America's busiest bridge.
What some are calling an abuse of power and an act of political retribution.
A potential presidential candidate caught up in scandal.
Tonight on Nightline, the boss.
Damn, man, I'm governor. Could you just shut up for a second?
Caught up in a scandal. He says he's humiliated.
And I come out here today.
Sad.
I'm sad. I'm sad.
And sorry.
I am sorry.
It's a far cry from his usual.
And I have no interest in answering your question.
Compare that once again to this.
In the past few weeks alone, she has fought illness and injury, including hospitalization. She leaves her post as the most admired woman in the world in the Gallup poll for the 11th year in a row. Well, today, Hillary Clinton was under fire and at times fired back.
After a fall, a concussion, and a blood clot, Hillary Clinton showed rare public emotion, reflecting the toll Benghazi has taken on her.
It was a valedictory that showed her indignation and emotion as she ends this tenure on the public stage.
But today, this woman who has traveled the world as America's top diplomat came to the Hill ready for a fight.
I want to talk about the hearings this week. You had a very long day. Also, how is your health?
A lot of you asked to see that again, so we show it to you again. I don't think there's any need to show it anymore, to say anymore. A tie-up at a bridge would appear to beat 4 dead in Benghazi. Hillary Clinton still a victim, Chris Christie still a bully, and Patricia Smith's son still dead, and still no answers why he's dead.
It's been a year and I'm not getting answers. I get told ridiculous things by the administration that I don't know. I'm just frustrated, very frustrated. My son is dead and the government doesn't care. I want an answer. Please get me an answer on that. Why? Why? Just why?
No issue. No issue we covered this week framed the biased media world in which we live, like these two stories and the way in which they were covered. Now, our research department did some digging. Here's what they found. It turns out that in the days immediately following Hillary Clinton's testimony, there were 71 headlines in the top 50 newspapers. In the days following the Christie Bridge controversy, 184 headlines in the same top 50 newspapers. Now, left or right, no one can take an unbiased look at just the numbers and come away and not say, hey, that's not right. And let's just say no issue came close to generating as much heat over the sheer unfairness of it. A.R.M tweets, people dead compared to people caught in traffic sure does make you sick with all the media bias and the agenda-driven news. Austin, wow, the media on Hillary and Christie agenda is obvious and horrible. Alexander via Twitter, thank you for finally exposing the craziness in the media coverage of the bridge scandal compared to the deaths of our people in Benghazi. Still this, regarding those media clips, I call it hook, line, and sinker as America takes the bait and switch. Conservative Latina tweets, yes, the bias and hypocrisy shown with Hillary and Benghazi, and outrage with Christie and Bridgegate, not surprising and expected. Then there's this, you are the best, thank you for Benghazi coverage and non-coverage. Still someone else, MSM, a bigger disgrace than any politician. The job of the media is to keep politicians honest, not to be more corrupt than the worst of them. Then there's Bob, who says, if Christie is guilty, he should suffer the consequences. But this media bias must stop, and Obama and Hillary should also pay if they're guilty. Also via Twitter, this. Loved how at Team Cavuto talked about how the media hasn't been hunting answers for the Benghazi attack. They should do better. Then this from Kevin, wondering if Chris Christie should have used Hillary's hashtag, what difference does it make, to force a comparison? And then this, heck, Beaver got more coverage in the last 24 hours than Benghazi has in the last 16 months. All right, now that we've heard from you, let us hear from an esteemed panel on this, because we just wanted to look at the coverage of this and maybe the blatant unfair nature of that coverage on this. Fox Business Network star Dagan McDonald, Kennedy, the co-host of The Independents on Fox Business Network, Democratic strategist Rick Unger, and political maestro Larry Sabato. Kennedy, to you first. My argument is, I think go after Chris Christie, the bridge thing was a horrible thing, stupid thing, especially was being a tough guy and trying to exact revenge, but be every bit as zealous going after the Benghazi story.
Absolutely, especially when you're dealing with two people who could possibly be president. And I think they both have big faults for different reasons. I personally think that Chris Christie is a bully. And I have my doubts as to whether or not he would be a good president on a number of issues. Also, he doesn't like libertarians. Although he came out in favor of decriminalizing pot this week. We'll table that for another day. Hillary Clinton, here's a woman who couldn't even go on the Sunday morning talk shows because she was too exhausted. She was too tired to go on the Sunday morning talk shows after Benghazi and give a thorough and acceptable explanation of what happened and where she was. If someone is so tired, they can't be president. If you're so tired after a scandal, how can you possibly be the commander-in-chief, and how can you possibly lead the executive branch in this country? Well,
you know, she raised a good point, taken, because my issue with both scandals, it wasn't about them. It wasn't about Hillary and how she's holding up. It wasn't about Governor Christie and how he's holding up. It was about the underlying scandal, the underlying mess. So I put them aside and how they're feeling and how they're holding up.
But the press, after Hillary Clinton's testimony, did not put it aside. It was about her and her health. That was a Valentine, if nothing exemplified the love affair that a lot of these media outlets have with her. It was not only sympathetic, it was cloying to her, and that is part of what is so disturbing about the way that this issue is covered. In the clip it said the toll it has taken on her. What about the 4 people who are dead, and what about the fact that we still don't have answers? And you want to talk about a bully, how about how she talked to Senator Ron Johnson, and that why did she get more heat for speaking that way?
Yeah,
what difference does it make?
What is she quoting, Smith's lyrics? I mean, that is such an offensive response to any tragedy. You know what difference it makes? It makes a big difference when the person you love most is dead, because you want answers and you want consequences and you want something. You want some form of justice. And so do the American people. That's what they should want. And the media allowing this to go to bed quietly, I mean, it says a lot about the way we also abandon our troops and those who serve.
Well, Larry Sabata, the other point is, I mean, in the way the scandals are covered, the media is a sign that one is more noteworthy than the other. Now, I'm just saying, if you're going to go after one, go after the other with full abandon, that's fine, but be very, very aggressive. And here, to me at least, there seemed to be a classic case of them picking and choosing who they wanted to go after.
Yeah, Neil, you asked the question, what was the subtext in each of the scandals that were covered? For Hillary Clinton, remember, this came up in September of 2012, right in the middle of the most intense part of the presidential campaign, when it was very close. Now, you know, I think just about every study has shown the vast majority of key media people vote Democratic, and I'm sure that was true in 2012. I haven't seen it applied to 2012, but I think we can reasonably assume that that was the case. So what was going on with Hillary Clinton and Benghazi, in a sense, contradicted the subtext, which was the presidential campaign. For Chris Christie, one of your guests just said it. The subtext of Chris Christie's narrative is he's a bully. This scandal fit that subtext perfectly. And so that was one reason why it got more coverage than the other, though I'll predict to you flatly, Neil, if Hillary does run for president, and during the Democratic nomination process, and if she's the nominee during the general election process, you're going to see far more on Benghazi in 2016 than you ever saw in 2012.
I don't know about that. I don't know about that, but you could be right. Rick Unger, what do you think?
I think Larry absolutely just nailed it, said exactly what was on my mind. Look, you have to put some reference to the timing here. When Benghazi happened, obviously there was heavily coverage. It wasn't focused on Hillary because, as Larry said, right smack in the middle of the election. If Hillary does run for president, I think Larry has absolutely got it right. You're going to hear Benghazi like you wouldn't believe. Also, I was a little curious.
Who will you hear it from, Rick? Who do you think you're going to hear it from?
I think all the papers. Look, you know.
There's no way. You might hear from her opponents. You might hear what anyone went. Do you think the Washington Post and New York Times are going to redig that issue? I don't.
Oh, I do. And you know how I feel about this, Neil. When it comes to media, it's what sells much more than what the politics are. When you get into this campaign and people start bringing up the word Benghazi, the media is going to go for it because it's going to sell. It's going to sell the newspapers. It's going to get people to watch it. By that definition,
it should have sold before, and it didn't. It was brought up and dropped. My issue, Kennedy, is that I hope these gentlemen are right, and that comes to pass. History tells me that they're much more zealous covering stories that might affect a conservative they don't like, and that's showing their liberal bias. It's just, to me, that's very obvious.
They also treated her like an elder statesman who was retiring from politics completely, and this was her swan song, this last
and
fight
she
on
was being
Capitol Hill.
abused and picked on by the Republican panel.
When really, will she withstand the scrutiny it's going to take to complete the job running for president?
She needn't worry. It's not. I just don't, with all deference to those fine gentlemen, I just don't think it's going to happen.
I think that it will come back to haunt her, number one, but sadly, covering the Christie scandal was just easier. Piling on to him, it was like something a screenwriter
and
wrote.
Geographically
quite frankly,
easier.
He's across the river
right, in the neck of the woods.
New York City. And also, it's like, why do we get wall-to-wall Justin Bieber coverage? Because he gets popped down in Miami. It's just easy. This is 5,000 miles away.
Who's Justin Bieber?
Exactly.
Okay.
But Benghazi's 5,000 miles away, and sadly, we can't let people forget that we still don't have answers, but it's a lazy media.
It is a lazy media. But, guys, I want to thank you all. I know we depart a little bit from this, but I did want to show that media comparison just to bring this up. And everyone has their set opinions on this issue, and I respect that. But, again, you cannot look at the coverage. You cannot look at the stats I raised or the amount of hours that were devoted to each story and come away without concluding, wait a minute, that's a biased media. Maybe it writes itself. I don't see it writing itself yet.